What's up, plant people? It's Jake. Welcome back to part 3 of the garden build. Today I'm going to be showing you how I built this beautiful raised bed right here. First off, I'm super excited to announce that the retaining wall is finished.
Can I get an amen up in here?
Amen.
7 truckloads of clay and $1,400 later, here we are. And with the help of a simple string line, I was able to get it nice and flat, making sure to leave a few inches for the gravel that I'm going to add. To start this project out, I'm going to use some inverted parking paint. Stuff kind of reminds me of Reddi-wip. After a lot of head scratching, I've finally come up with a layout that I really like. It consists of 4 of these L-shaped raised beds going around in a square, and then some sort of centerpiece here. The bed itself is 10 foot in that direction and 8 foot coming this direction. It is 3.5 feet wide, thickness all around, and I've got 3 feet of walking space between where the bed is and where the enclosed gate is going to start. And then from the gate, I've got 2 feet to the edge of the retaining wall, which eventually I'll amend with some better soil and do like some flowers or ornamental shrubs, something to just give it a nice border. What I'm doing here is simply measuring 3 feet off of the blue line, which was already measured off of the retaining wall, and I'm just using a 2x4 as a template so I can get a nice straight line with my marking. Now that I've got the outside line done, I'm going to move to the inside, so I'm just offsetting that by 3.5 feet from the original marking. Okay, so we have 1 and now we have number 2. One thing I want to point out about this raised bed system that I'm doing here, it's a lot wider than I would normally do it. Normally I'd be at a max of 3 feet width, and it just makes it easier to reach over and access anything if you only have one-sided access. But here I've got ample space inside and around the outside of the beds to reach from both directions. So I figured I'd go ahead and maximize my space with a wider bed at 42 inches. This blue line is very, very important. This is where the fence is gonna go. And some people ask me,
Well, why you do it then, baby Billy? Well, because I'm selfish.
and I don't feel like sharing my whole harvest with the deer. If you live out in the sticks like I do, then having a fence is gonna be very important for keeping Bambi at bay from eating your
Beans, greens, potatoes, tomatoes.
Now this looks like a nice wide open space right now, but trust me, it won't be for long. Once you start building these large structures everywhere, and you've got your tomato cages and your trellises and your green beans smacking you in the face, you're gonna feel a little cramped. So one thing I always make sure to do with everything is give myself a nice walkway. Here I've left 4 feet between these raised beds to make sure that I have a straight shot through, because I've got plans for the future. The fun doesn't stop at the raised bed garden. I'm gonna have a whimsical greenhouse right back there. Now this retention wall is about 4 foot up off of the original grade. So what I'm gonna do is build a swing bridge leading to a whimsical greenhouse that's gonna be on the same level as this retention wall. But before any of that, I have a little bit more spray painting to do. Alright guys, the 3rd location marking is complete, but unfortunately my spray paint can is feeling emptier than my wallet after this project. Just listen to that. So I'm probably gonna just have to live with these 3 location markings. I can really safely assume that the 4th one's gonna fit here, no problem. I've walked through it. I feel like I have enough space for planting, and I have enough space for walking. So next thing that I have to do here is make a lumber trip and start building these beds. So here it is, about $300 in pressure treated lumber. Now, in the world of raised bed gardening, there is a big debate on whether or not you should use this, and that's mainly because of how it was treated in the past with things such as arsenic. The lumber I'm using is treated with a micronized copper, which most definitely will leach into the soil as the wood starts to degrade over time. But I'm going to mitigate this with a few steps that you'll see later in the video. And if you know anything about how finicky plants can be, you'd realize that the plant would just die before transferring anything to your body. Which brings up another issue about the difference in bioavailability to a plant versus what it's actually going to transfer to you. Two very different things, but let's get back to the build. So I've got the first of 3 layers nailed together, and here I am bringing a second layer. Since I was working on level ground, I was able to stack all these layers on top of each other without them falling all over the place while I nailed them in. Speaking of nails,
Jesus Christ. That's Jason Bourne.
here we have the third and final layer going up. For this build, I chose to use 2x8s. The actual dimension on each of these boards is 7¼ inches. So with 3 layers laying on top of each other, that brings me up to a grand total of 21¾ inch height, plus the top plate that I'm going to add, so add another 1.5 inches. Here I have 2 pieces of 2x6, which I'm ripping a 45-degree angle down the length of, which I'm going to nail together and use as a structural corner piece, which will allow me to cover up the unfinished edges of the boards as well as tie those 3 layers together structurally. If you want to save on some lumber cost, you don't absolutely have to do these corner pieces. I chose to because I felt like it gave it a good look, as well as being an easy way to tie those 3 layers together. Seeing as this wood's going to be living outside, I know it's going to want to warp up on me, so I'm adding some extra pieces between the corners to help lock those boards in together. And just because my outfit's a little crazy doesn't mean my angles have to be, so I'm making sure to use my speed square on everything. Now that the side trim is done, I want to attach a top plate. You don't have to do this. This is more of a decorative thing, but it does give you a nice surface to set things on when you're gardening or kneeling over the edge or whatever. For the top plate, I'm using 2x6s that are run a little longer than the length of the wall because I have a 2.5 inch overhang with a mitered cut to give me that nice picture frame look. And here we have it, a $300 box of wood that's going to allow me to harvest a 25-cent vegetable. Now, since I am using pressure treated wood, I figured I'd go ahead and take the extra step to line it with some 3mm plastic. Here I am just nailing this from top to bottom, wrapping it all the way around the inside of the structure. This should protect the soil a little bit more and protect the wood from being wet all the time. Here I have an eye bolt, a thimble, and a cable clamp. I'm going to be using these to secure a steel cable from wall to wall on the inside of the garden bed to ensure the weight of the soil doesn't cause the walls to bow outward. Now, you could have went about this a different way, but this is what made sense to me, and you can pick all these things up in the cable section of your big box store. Another thing you might want to consider, especially if you have a problem with moles like I do, is using this 1/4 inch square hardware cloth at the bottom of your bed to prevent those little freeloaders from setting up shop. Now that the hard part's out of the way, I'm going to start filling up the bed. I'm starting with the base layer of logs that I cut down last year, and I'm going to build this up to about half the height of the bed, followed by a nice thick layer of oak leaves. This technique is referred to as hugelkultur, which does have a few benefits, but the one I was mainly interested in was the amount of money you save on soil. Now, don't get me wrong, I still used a lot of soil, about 50 of these 1 cubic foot bags to be exact. And here I am doing a little hoeing around. These bags sure do come clumpy, and some eggshells from this morning's breakfast for good measure. Now that the build is about done, time to have a little fun. And here she is in all her glory. All in all, this project took me 2 days and about $500, including the lumber, paint, screws, and soil. So it's certainly not the cheapest option, but what a back saver having an elevated bed like this is. I hope this video helps some of you out there build your own gardens. And if you enjoyed this build, please subscribe and stay tuned for the next part of this garden adventure. See you guys next time.